All right, we just heard the mayor of San Juan making an emotional appeal to President Trump and telling him that his recovery effort is not a good news story.
When you're drinking from a creek, it's not a good news story. When you don't have food for a baby, it's not a good news story. When you have to pull people down from their buildings, because I'm sorry, but that really upsets me and frustrates me. You know, I would ask her to come down here and visit the towns and then make a statement like that, which frankly, it is an irresponsible statement, and it contrasts with the statements of support that I have been getting since yesterday when I got that call from the White House. This is, damn it, this is not a good news story. This is a people are dying story. This is a life or death story. There's a truckload of stuff that cannot be taken to people's story. This is a story of a devastation that continues to worsen because people are not getting food and water. If I could scream it a lot more louder, it is not a good news story when people are dying, when they don't have dialysis, when their generators aren't working and their oxygen isn't providing for them.
All right, joining us now, CNN political analyst and New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman and CNN senior political commentator David Axelrod. Well, she just couldn't have said it any more plainly, Maggie. And what she was responding to there was the acting Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke saying, actually, our reach to people in need, it has been a good news story.
Well, there is a problem with making sweeping declarations in any kind of disaster. We've certainly seen it in New York with mayors over many years. This is obviously a much broader scale. There is a degree to which you see in the Trump administration officials beginning to adopt the same language the president does constantly, which is something of self-praise and something of talking about how well they are doing, because that's what's important to the president. We have seen him tweet that repeatedly. You can look at the images of what's going on, and you can see the delays. And I think that you said it before, right before I came on, that two things can be true. It can be true that there are efforts to make this happen, and it can be true that it is not good enough. And when you listen to this mayor, her words are pretty heartbreaking and clearly very heartfelt. This is not going to end anytime soon. And you have the president this morning tweeting something about how big decisions are going to have to be made about rebuilding. That still feels, I think, for people who are there dealing with this, right, very early to be saying that.
Bossert says, his Homeland Security advisor, well, that's about cash on hand. Florida and Texas, who also, you're talking 100, 200 plus $1 million in debt. They're easily $1 billion in debt, really, when it comes all together. But they had cash on hand. But that's not how it plays. It plays that the president was putting a condition X on how much the government will do to help rebuild as a function of their own solvency right now. There's an aspect of this that is just politics. We know what the reality is on the ground is. You hear it from the mayor, you hear it from the governor, you hear it from all the reporters. We know what it is. It's bad. It's not getting better fast enough, period. The politics that we're hearing from Bossert, Elaine Duke, they're obviously being put in a position by somebody, we'll leave it open, to go out there and say we're doing great. Don't let the media frame us as not getting this done. But the reality is it's not getting done, whether it's about blame or not, Axe. He can want to be a winner all he wants. Nobody is winning in Puerto Rico right now.
Yeah, and there's more to this, and Maggie is the world's foremost expert on Donald Trump and could probably speak volumes on this. But she talks about the heartbreaking testimony we heard. The question is, can his heart be broken? Can he display any kind of empathy for other people? And that has been what has been absent from his rhetoric. It's all about him. It's always about him. And this is a place where the President of the United States needs to express through action and also through words a sense of connection with people who are desperate and people who are dying, who are American citizens.
He didn't even talk about it for almost a week.
Cannot do that.
He was caught up in the NFL situation.
That's right. It was compounded by this contrivance, and it was something of his own invention, of this rekindling of the Colin Kaepernick controversy, which was purely a political exercise. He engaged in it all weekend long as the people of Puerto Rico were calling out for assistance. So, you know, this goes not just to operational issues. This goes to personality deficiencies in the president, and we've seen it before, and we're seeing it now.
Well, look, empathy or no empathy, Maggie, they want action. And what has happened this week is that when the president has heard testimony like that on our air and elsewhere, then he has acted. He does lift the Jones Act. Once he hears that something's going wrong, then, of course, he does want the reputation of being in control and being a winner, and then he does do something, you know, reactively.
Right. I mean, look, I find it very unlikely that General Kelly, who has a very impressive and respected resume, has not told him in briefings what was actually going on in Puerto Rico. But for whatever reason, this president always needs to see it himself, and he needs to see it from the outside world coming in from television, and that is what moves him. And it's good that they lifted the Jones Act temporarily, but it is still not clear why it took so many days. And whatever the reason is that it takes him so long to get there on certain issues, for people who are suffering, for voters in various places in the country, for people in Puerto Rico, in Florida, wherever we're talking about, it doesn't really matter to them what the reason is and what is going on in terms of the psychology of the president as to why it takes him a while. This is just, we have seen this play out over and over again with him now. This is a major crisis that is not of his own making. I would argue this is one of the first, take out North Korea, which is partly his involvement in terms of escalating rhetoric. This is the first real crisis that is not of his own making that he is having to face. It is not on the U.S. mainland, and so it's possible people are looking at it differently, but it is a massive, massive human catastrophe, and we are just getting started.
And, you know, there's a little bit of confusion. People will say, well, why was the governor, why were the mayor, why do they say thank you then? You know, if the response isn't enough. There's a political reality. You bite the hand that feeds you in a situation like this. Things can get worse real fast, especially with this administration. So you got to be, you have to allow the political leaders down there to show thanks for what's going on. It doesn't mean that they're not asking for more. Ax, let me ask you about a different topic. Tom Price, what's your analysis on what the Health and Human Services Secretary did that was wrong, his reaction to it by saying he'll pay for a little bit, and what his ultimate fate's going to be?
Well, what was wrong was obvious. I mean, he was flying around at taxpayers' expense, and he, you know, his response is too little, and it's probably too late. And I find it particularly egregious when it comes at a time when he's been fighting so hard to cut health care for people, when he's not discharging funds for Affordable Care Act enrollment. You know, I mean, it is wrong in a million different ways. And I must say, Chris, if this had happened in another administration, the Congress would be even more vigorous, and the president would be sending this guy on his way. We'll see what happens. But this is, it's an extraordinary story. I mean, the scope of this, I mean, lifestyles of the rich and famous flying that he's doing at a time when the administration is talking about austerity and cutting waste and is waging war on the Affordable Care Act by withholding money. Just a terrible story for him and the administration.
And the hypocrisy of it, of course, adds another nice layer. Maggie, why is the president so upset about this one?
Because this one is something that is very easy for everybody to understand. This just cuts through very clearly. And to be clear, initially earlier this week when I spoke to administration officials and asked very plainly, will Price survive? They said, yes, actually, he's weathering this. He's going to come out damaged, but he was already damaged. The president has never really liked him. He was, you know, sort of absent during the health care debate very early on back in the spring. Then there was this story about, in Politico, about him, you know, going to go see his son with one of these planes, doing all sorts of personal work. That really did begin to impact the president. The president can see us playing these headlines, and he realizes it is impacting negatively on him, that he is very, very finely attuned to public perception. And this is just something every voter can understand. What I still marvel at, though, again, even as the president understands this, number one, my understanding is Price was not told to pay back this money. Number two, he did it in a way that is going to keep this going. He's paying for his seat, which is going to then raise questions about How are the other seats being paid for?
He took the whole plane.
Right, right,
just gonna pay for his seat.
and it was done for him. Does this now raise a litmus test for other cabinet secretaries? But this administration has also never failed when the opportunity comes to just rip the Band-Aid off quickly of a bad news story. They never fail to leave it on and rip it off really, really slowly. And that's what's happening right now. It is hard to see Price surviving. He could. Certainly Jeff Sessions is still in his job. It's a little bit of a different scenario. But the president is very, very irritated by this. I can't see this lasting a long time. They don't have a ton of candidates who want that job, which might actually save Price for a bit. But this is just dragging on in a drip way that's not helpful to them at all.
It can't be easy to get people to take jobs when you get jettisoned from the place so fast, and this idea of loyalty is fading fast.
Right, or I think it's not even so much that you get jettisoned so fast, but you get sort of tormented and then jettisoned, or you get publicly humiliated, or you see your own brand take some serious nicks. I think that's what's going on.
Maggie, David, thank you very much. So we should note that tomorrow, be sure to watch a special Axe Files. David Axelrod is going to speak with James Baker. That's tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
That's a good one. All right, so in Puerto Rico, the need is great on every level. Food, medicine, gas, water, cash. The banks aren't open. No power for credit card machines. You need cash. We're going to go live on the ground for a closer look at what it is like to survive there.